Hello and welcome to Old Romans Unscripted. And good afternoon, Brother Stanislaus. How are you?
I'm doing well, Excellency. Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. The weather is not. It's been a nice day today, weather-wise.
Oh, good, good. But you can hear me all right.
Yeah, can hear you fine.
Okay. I'm trying a couple of different things, and I'm not sure how it's picking up. So just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, if anything happens to your sound, I will let you know.
Okay.
Welcome everybody. We've been away, as you know, for gone out of focus. There we are. We've been away for a couple of weeks. I was in France last week, and in the last 2 months, I've been to France, Greece, and Armenia. I'm now here for a few weeks until August, and then I'm off to Portugal. And then after that, we're off to Slovakia for ordinations. Now, speaking of ordinations of your charity, this time of the year is a traditional time for ordinations, Petertide. So pray for those who have been ordained, and of your charity, remember Robert, who is to be ordained deacon by my hands tomorrow, and he will be priested later this year. So for Dr. Robert Wilson, please pray for him and his ordination tomorrow. Otherwise, please say hi in the comments. Tell us where you're from. So hello to Sunta in Portugal. Excellent. Greetings to you, and hello to Anne, a faithful from Ireland. Good evening and welcome to you all. It's good evening here in the UK. It's good afternoon there in the States. Now, there's a lot has gone on, particularly in the past week, for us to talk about, but certainly in the past 2 weeks, and a particular subject from 2 weeks ago that has become relevant again this week, particularly due to, well, if I put this photograph up, then no doubt that will launch the discussion. So, of course, 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court in the US ruled against Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs case, the Dobbs judgment. And just to be clear, and brother, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, what the Supreme Court has ruled is that constitutionally, abortion is not a right under the Constitution, and that they've basically sent decisions about abortions back to the individual states themselves. In other words, saying that this is not something that can be federally ruled upon, simply because it's not in the Constitution. Have I got that right?
Yes, but there's also, it's really nuanced, as our Constitution is. And really, what the majority opinion said was that there's no right to privacy found in our Constitution, which is how Roe v. Wade was ruled, on the basis of this understanding of the right to privacy. And so this has been, those of us on this side have known this during this many year fight over this, that it was all about the right to privacy. But because of the way, and we will say the supreme way our judicial system works in this country, it takes a long time, if it's done the proper way, it takes a long time to overturn a legislatively promulgated law. That's why when a law comes out from the legislator, it's a big deal, because if it's a bad law, oh my gosh, it could take forever to undo it. And this took almost 50 years. So
I think there's an important point there as well, that the Supreme Court is not the legislature. The legislature is
That's right.
the Senate. So it's
We haven't. Well, no. The legislature is our second because we have three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Legislature is the House and the Senate together, and then of course you have the executive, which is the president. So the president, as who right now is Joe Biden, he really is the one with the most power because he can just speak from the pulpit and say, "I want this and I want that," and he's 1/3 of the vote. But as you can see now,
he can sign laws himself.
Yes,
can't he? He can enact
laws. But then, like with, if many will remember when our former president signed some executive privileges, as they're called, the Democrat Congress immediately acted to overturn some of those, which they have the right to do. And in some cases, like in this case, the Supreme Court can enter and say, no, you have read the Constitution improperly. Yeah. This is the proper way. So, you know, I was kind of thinking, okay, go ahead. You might be making my point. Go ahead.
Is that is for people to understand that it is not the Supreme Court who makes the laws. The Supreme Court's job is to interpret the Constitution and to interpret any laws in light of the Constitution.
And of course, that's how it's always supposed to be. In the past 25 years, you know, that's all come into question just a bit. Right. But what I was getting to that might interest our viewers is that the Supreme Court, in a way, operates as sort of the magisterium for our country. That they are only supposed to, you know, they look at it and they say, okay, executive says this, legislative says this, but are they saying what's in what was said in the founding document? And the only thing is that, unlike how we interpret what's come down from the ages of the church, you know, this whole idea of living, whether it's dead or living, a dead constitution or the Constitution's alive, you know, you start to get into a whole other argument. But it's interesting. And I think with some of the things that have happened this week, which I know you're bringing up in the Vatican and the magisterium, you know, it makes you wonder, okay, what is...
There's yes, there are parallels in this contemporary paradigm. Right, I'm just going to bring on our third panelist.
Good, yes.
We have three of us, so 1 second. Bishop Kelly, hello, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
How are you?
Pretty good.
Excellent. So, of course, so we've jumped right in.
I hear that.
With the Roe v. Wade, because of course we weren't on last week, so we weren't able to discuss this momentous ruling. And as you've just heard, we've just been explaining, because I think a lot of the angst at the moment seems to be around a misperception or misunderstanding by many American citizens as to the way, as to the tripartite nature of the way the country is ruled, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. So Brother Stanislaus has just explained that for us. And of course, although this is a huge decision for America, one of the things I think Dr. Taylor has finally realised that as for the rest of the world, this is not such a big deal. But of course, it is a huge win for the pro-life cause. What response or reactions have you, Excellency, on on this situation?
Well, I see a complete and total overreaction on one side, and a sort of an underreaction on the other. I think we have to remember that this pill is bitter on both sides. The pro-death lobby are upset because it's been kicked back to the states, and they know quite rightly that some of the states will reject this and will enact laws. But in states such as Illinois, New York, California, etc., nothing's changed. And I think those who are on the pro-life side, the anti-abortion side, have to remember that this hasn't taken away abortion. It's just left it to states. You can still get up-to-term abortions in New York. So it is not a complete victory. And for those who are pro-death, it's not a complete disaster. You can still have your dead babies in certain states. What annoys me is that living in a city like Chicago, where we're being taxed and taxed, crime is through the roof. They're defunding the police, etc. But you have the mayor and also then the governor of Illinois pledging billions of dollars in order to ship people in from states that don't allow abortions so that they can have their abortions here. And I think that's an absolute misappropriation of funds, while we, the citizens of Illinois, suffer. We have potholes in our streets, we have et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're being taxed and taxed and taxed. There's a pension deficit, everything else. But yet they're more obsessed with bringing these people, paying for them to come into our state to have their abortion. So I mean, it's I was listening. I had to nip out this morning to run an errand, and I put on the radio, and NPR, which is our national public radio, they're still on about abortion. It's wall to wall abortion, abortion, abortion. And it's over a week now. They thought that the whole fabric of society is going to fall apart because of abortion, and it's all grandstanding and stunts. I mean, one of the greatest stunts we saw was an unplanned visit of Nancy Pelosi in order to parade her agenda up and down the aisle of St. Peter's in Rome to meet the Pope and to receive Holy Communion when she's been forbidden by her own bishop to do so.
Yeah.
Not just in the Archdiocese of San Francisco, but he admonished her not to present herself for communion anywhere.
Yeah, and that's where we were going with this point.
But it's about sanctifying her point of view. That was unplanned. That was last minute. The Feast of St. Peter and Paul. Off she goes, meets the Pope. Smile, photo op, photo op, photo op. My own bishop says I can't, but the Pope is going to give me and my views access to Holy Communion. The whole thing is just grandstanding. It's a publicity stunt. It's a motive. There is no rationale behind it. It's just typical. And the Democrats, it seems to me, see that this is such a wonderful smokescreen, an emotive smokescreen that will get them off the hook in the midterms for a botched exit from Afghanistan, from high inflation, from high gas prices, etc., 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 when they have the lowest approval ratings so far, and the country seems to be turning against them. The Supreme Court handed them this cake on a plate and said, there you go, shout and scream abortions and women's rights. And I love the reproductive rights. There's no reproduction in it if you're killing the baby. Reproduction health care. Oh, God, I shudder to think. And then there was a whole debate too about this weekend about, well, what if the fetus has Down syndrome or is disabled? and I can't get access to an abortion. I would remind people that that's how Hitler started, with the disabled and removing them from society. So the whole thing sickens me, to be honest. I wish I didn't have to listen to it. I've turned the radio off more than I've ever done in my life recently,
Well, of
because
course,
I just can't listen to it.
and that historically is actually the motivation behind abortion, particularly in the States. Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, was pronounced racist, and they deliberately targeted black communities to have their clinics, and I mean, it's
I know. There's a thing this week on the radio again. NPR had somebody on from African American people of color women's reproductive clinic, and I said this is going to affect the African American and Latino community the most. Well, that was the whole point of it in the beginning. You're holding on to this tradition because that's what it was designed to do in the first place, is to affect the short-sightedness of it, the lack of logic or learning or of any sort of understanding is out the window. It's about people screaming and showing, baring their breasts and writing on their stomach, "I am not yet a human," their pregnant stomach, their pregnant belly. While other children are running around. I mean, the whole thing is, it's just absolutely nuts. I read a wonderful quip that somebody wrote, obviously a Republican, but he said, "I haven't seen the Democrats so upset since we took away their slaves." And if you remember, the Democratic Party were the pro-slavery party, and the Republicans with Lincoln were anti-slavery. But yes, I haven't seen them so upset since they took away their slaves, and they really are upset about this. Imagine taking away a convenience of a modern Western person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people do forget that the Democrats were for segregation right up to the 60s. They forget that Biden himself was for segregation in the 80s, and that he enacted laws that Kamala Harris implemented that were designed to maximize the number of black people that were sent to jail. I mean, it's the racism in the Democratic Party and its history and its foundations is, it's there. If
Absolutely.
if people would just see it, and what gets me, I think, again, is as we discussed last time when we were talking about transgenderism, it's the pseudoscience. It's the complete unscientific appreciation for human fertilization and conception and when human life begins. All this nonsense that a fetus isn't human, etc. Well, what is it? If it's not human, what is it? What else? Does it have the potential to become a dolphin or a puppy or a kitten? Or of course it doesn't. It's human. And if life doesn't begin at conception, then when does it begin? This is basic biology. And you get people who say, "Oh well, what about eggs and what about eggs?" Until they come together and there's fertilization, they individually don't constitute a human being. You need a fertilized egg for conception to occur, and that's when a human being life begins. But this pseudoscience, and these same people are the ones who at the same time think that you can deny your biology, and that you can be whoever you want to declare yourself to be. They are nut jobs. They are crazy people.
But the world panders to them. The world tells them they're not. Emperor, you have plenty of clothes on. It's I don't know. I really don't know. And just back to the Nancy Pelosi thing for the church, certainly the church in Rome, to pander to it, to speak out of both sides of their mouth, is absolutely upsetting.
But this is typical of the Franciscan pontificate.
Yes.
I mean, typical of the Franciscan pontificate. So he himself has said nothing, but he's actually said everything by entertaining her at the Vatican, and by seemingly allowing her to receive Holy Communion at Mass. Now, I say seemingly because we don't know quite how planned or not it was. And certainly the Pope himself didn't communicate her. One of the concelebrating clergy did. The question is, did he know who she was or not?
Of course they know. She would have had flanked with security, they would have been given a heads up that the secretary, the Speaker of the House in the United States is in the Basilica. Of course they would have known.
But the security guards aren't either side of her when she goes up for communion.
Well, they wouldn't be too far away.
No, they wouldn't be too far away. But
Well, I think that the typical apologist, American apologist, immediately came out and explained that, well, it's they don't watch everybody who gets in line, and it's not like she was in line with the Holy Father, and that priest was among a number of priests who distributed Holy Communion. But I'm like Bishop Kelly. I think I'm a little more skeptical, but and like Bishop Kelly, I am sick of all of this. I think like him. I think it's certainly a political victory first and foremost. It's spiritual victory. I think that's, you have to allow for some of that. There's certainly, because it is important, but I think people have to recognize it's first and foremost a secular political victory. That's how everyone's taking it. But probably a Pyrrhic victory. And just like all Pyrrhic victories, it's not going to be understood till later. And no one's going to be cheering when it's really understood. But I just wanted to mention a couple of funny anecdotes in regard to this. There's a popular show here in this country called The View, which I never watch. I try not to watch even clips of it because it disgusts me so much. But it's five Whoopi Goldberg and you probably know who I'm talking about. They were so disgusted with the ruling that they went and had The View in the Bahamas. And the Bahamas and their laws are worse on abortion than the United States. And they didn't even realize it. Okay.
It's illegal.
And then it's illegal. Another one, remember this, after hearing all of this that's going on, all the ranting and raving that's going on from the left, the far left. But remember when they were testifying before Congress, Planned Parenthood was saying abortion is only 3% of their business. 3%. If I'm running a business and they tell me, hey, it's illegal for you to do that 3%, but the 97%, go on, do your business. I say, thank you for not fining me, and I move along. But what are they doing? In Texas, they closed up. In Mississippi, they closed up. In Alabama, they closed up. Why? Because it wasn't 3% of their business. It was all of their business. And then just lastly, with Pelosi, I think it was certainly maybe not planned, but they knew about it. And I think it goes well into what Excellency wanted to talk about today, about the Pope's most recent motu proprio, because I think that's really his understanding of Holy Communion. The Holy Communion is about communion. It's about inviting everyone. It's about even if they're broken, even if they're sinful, even if they're outside, if they can say okay and come in, mind you, as I sit on the throne, if I say they're okay, then everyone should say they're okay, because we're all living under the not just hyper-papalism, but hyper-Peterism. That's what he's doing.
Yep.
There's a lot of
that does nicely segue us into what is it called? Desiderio, desideravi, Desiderio, desideravi, the new motu proprio by Pope Francis, or the new letter, where again he's talking about the liturgy. Again, he's trying to promote the Novus Ordo Missae of Paul VI as the sole one Roman rite. And again, the lies. He begins by suggesting that the Novus Ordo Missae is what the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council, called for. And of course, we all know it isn't. The 1965 Roman Missal was pretty much what the Conciliar Fathers asked for, and it is described in Sacrosanctum Concilium, but the same is not true of the Novus Ordo Missae. But again, what just gobsmacks me is the willingness to blatantly lie to justify their actions.
But that's just it. He doesn't see it as a lie. They don't see it as a lie. It's not a lie. We are the ones that are misunderstanding. We are rereading. We are reading it wrong. We are the terrible restorationists, and we have to get on with the program. That the ship has already sailed. Vatican II has spoken. The Fathers have spoken. There's a new understanding, and it's understood in the rite of Paul VI only. That is the way the Roman rite is to be understood. And for those of you who are attached, well, okay, we're going to give you some time, but you get on with the program. And this motu proprio to me was simply saying, hey, we're not going to wait for you. Get going, or you're going to be cut off completely. I don't see how anybody can look at it any differently. It's to me, it was a doubling down of Vatican II has spoken. The Mass of Paul VI is the Roman rite. There is no connection in the sense of everything that was old can be found in the new. So the restorationists must be eliminated. There's no place for us. There's a place for everything else in the church. Everything, as they demonstrated in the month of June. Everything else, there's a place for it. And we must find a place for it. But there's no room for discussion even for this. And that's what I think this motu proprio does. Says, actually, not does, but it says.
Yeah, it basically says that the new order of Mass expresses the Church's thought and teaching. And if you don't accept the Mass, you don't accept the teaching of the Church. Now, how you can pretzel yourself into that argument, I don't know, because as you mentioned, the council documents do not stand up to the new order of Mass. Rightly, the 65 Mass, yes. There's an argument there that this is what the council had in mind, had envisaged. But apparently Francis in Rome and this character Roche, who seems to be just dreadful, just absolutely dreadful, are quite happy with all the liturgical abuses that happen. And we saw Flager's thing at was it Pentecost here in Chicago, with the light shows and the screaming and the howling. Now that represents the teaching of the church apparently, but a reverent Tridentine Mass does not. We had recently someone again in Chicago who blessed the congregation with a guitar as you would with a monstrance. That the music and the modern music thing for worship has replaced the Blessed Sacrament, is what it said to me. You have priests on hoverboards. You still have balloon and clown masses going on in Germany. Anyone that says to you, "Oh, there's no clown masses," that was the 70s and 80s. No, they're still going on. There's all sorts of abuses, not just abuses, sacrileges, and you will not find that in any Latin Mass because there's no room for it. Absolutely no room for it. Yet that's bad. That's evil. It must be stopped. Long live the chaos.
And notice that although even Francis has lamented the abuses in the Novus Ordo, nothing is ever done about it.
Nothing's ever done it.
None of these priests are ever, brought up on canonical charges. They never face disciplinary proceedings for these liturgical.
Well, because I think he says this in the document. He says that I forget. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that something like this, you must allow for these mistakes. You must allow for the growth, because this is things like this are going to happen. So stop nitpicking so much, because this is the way the church, the way the Holy Spirit has spoken, and this is the way the church is going. And so, yes, mistakes are going to be made, but we are evangelizing because the new liturgy speaks to the people. The old liturgy is internal. It's only internal. It's only this with the priest by himself. The new liturgy turns to the people and speaks to the people, and that's what we're not doing. The reason why the new liturgy and Vatican II has failed is because we're not evangelizing properly. Now, of course, I'm speaking for him. Now, I think he'd be pretty happy with me, but I do not believe that. It's stupid. It's silly. Because then what you have is what you got, what you both spoken of, is that, well, then this priest can do it this way, and this priest is doing it this way, and they both have the spirit of evangelizing. They're doing conversions. The confessional lines are long. People are coming. The people are giving money. So how can you say they're wrong? Well, because like Bishop Kelly said, and what you're not hearing, that's not the sacrament. It's something else. And what we have known all this time, it's not Catholic. It's something, it's spiritual. Okay, we can see that, but it's not Catholic. So, maybe that's what we need to be saying more and more. I know people have been saying it, and we've gotten in trouble, and many have been in many ways killed for speaking out in this way. But what else are we to do? Because for me, that's the follow-up question. Okay, he comes out with another motu proprio. Okay, traditionis custodes. Okay, we're still dealing with that in a way. Then he gets another one, throws it down. What do we do? Because are we not saying that we are in a time of emergency, operating in a time of crisis, and that we must act as missionaries in what has been given to us, because we recognize and see that the sacraments of the church are not only life-giving, but we cannot operate without them. And if God has given that to me, then I have a responsibility. It's not for me just to sit here in my office and talk about it or lament about it, I've got to do something. Okay. So then that's why I turn to you. I look to you, to the bishops. Okay, what do we do? And so I would think that as the people also look at you. I do. What do we do? Because Peter is screaming that we're wrong and we're outside. And of course, our Catholicness, we want to be fully and wholly and totally Catholic. That's why we're Old Romans. We don't want to be something new. Yeah, exactly. So of course we have a love for the papacy. We have a love for everything Rome. We have a love for all of that. And it's like missing an old friend. And so in that sense, that's what I mean. What do we do?
Well, there's a lot. And it's something that we all have to do. And I think there's an important point here that many people forget that Archbishop Lefebvre made, is that what's important first is the faith, then the Mass. The faith is what's important first. And in that sense, everyone, any Catholic, any and every Catholic who cares, should take it upon themselves to catechize themselves and ensure that they do know the faith and they understand the faith and the faith of the ages, not this newfangled spirit of Vatican II rubbish, but the Catholic faith that was taught for centuries. And as bishops, that our office is a teaching office. And certainly I know that Bishop Kelly, like myself, we're very hot on catechesis and encouraging people to study and know the true faith. And from that will come the Mass. You see, the ills of our day, both in the church and in society, are because too few people make a stand. Too few people speak up. Remember St. Thomas More in his trial said that, silence betokens consent. And because so many people are silent, all this rubbish goes on. So both in terms of society and in the church, people themselves have got to make a stand, and they've got to start speaking up, and they've got to start, to use Bishop Kelly's analogy, they've got to start laughing at the emperor. They've got to start pointing out that there are no clothes, and they've got to say it, and they have to say it boldly and courageously. And the truth of the matter is, as everybody knows, and the left fears, there is a huge silent majority. But it's time now for that silent majority to speak up. To speak up. And if people speak up, from that will come the Mass. From that will come then the demand for the Mass. So in the first instance, I would say it's necessary for all traditional Catholics to know the faith and teach the faith and make a stand for the faith, and then to seek out the sacraments. And we will do our level best to supply as we are able to demand. But part of the problem at the present time is that we don't have people banging down our doors screaming for sacraments and the Mass. And that's why, because they don't have proper catechesis, because they think that what they're getting now is okay, because they think they will get to heaven by being generally okay. And that's because they have forgotten fundamental basics of Christian theology and praxis, i.e. the pursuit of personal holiness, and of a real desire for communion with God. Everything has become, laissez-faire. And the trouble at the moment is that a lot of would-be traditional Catholics don't understand that the issue is not about aesthetics. It's not about the traditional Latin Mass looks nice and etc. That's why we're horrified that they're trying to get rid of it. No, the point of the issue is that only the Latin Mass manifests and expresses the Catholic faith. The modern Mass does not do that. And for that reason, the modern Mass is bad. Now, as we've said before, we can't necessarily declare it invalid, but certainly we can say that it doesn't give the fullness of grace compared to the traditional Latin Mass. And certainly in the form and rubrics, the modus celebrandi of the Novus Ordo does not convey inherently the faith. You see, if the priest can consecrate without genuflecting, if people can receive simply in their hands without washing them or showing it otherwise any kind of deference or reference for the Eucharist, what does that say? It doesn't say, here is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, here is God of God, light from light, very God of very God. It simply says, it's a wafer. And that is the significance of having the majority of Protestants in the concilium, which was put together by and chaired by Brunini, that formulated the Novus Ordo. And until people realize, this is the problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned catechesis there. And, if you have faith, if you've discovered faith, then it's incumbent upon you to get to know the faith. And you can only truly love. It's like a partnership, or a husband or a wife. You can only truly love them. I mean, it starts out with infatuation and attraction. But you can only get to know them and truly love them once you get to know them. And it's the same with the faith. It can start out with attraction, infatuation, curiosity, but you need to get to know it. You need to get to know the ins and outs of it in order to embrace it and to love it. It's like taking down an old family album. Remember the old albums we used to have before we had phones? And photographs would be pasted into them, and here's your great great grandfather, and this was where they lived then, and here's you when you were one, and all that sort of stuff, and great aunts and all that. That's like the catechism, discovering the history of the faith, which belongs to you. It is part of your history. It is part of your patrimony. It is part of your heritage, which belongs to you. You're entitled to it. You're entitled to know it. You're entitled to embrace it. You're entitled to love it. You're entitled to be proud of it, of where you've come from in the history of faith, in the divine economy of God's plan for salvation. It is part and parcel of you. You have inherited it. You are heirs to the kingdom, as St. Paul reminds us. So it is incredibly, incredibly important that you get good catechesis in order to deepen your faith, to embrace the faith, and to love the faith, to truly love the faith. The early Christians loved the faith so much they were willing to die for it. There are Christians today who love the faith so much that they are dying for it. It's very, very important. And conversely, now I don't know this at all for sure, but it seems to me that there is a direct agenda not to, or to badly, catechize the faithful, because they don't want them to know the riches of the faith. They want them to know that Jesus wants them for a sunbeam and the kumbaya stuff, and everyone goes to heaven, there are many paths and all that sort of stuff. that, that Christ can be present in the Eucharist in different ways, that we can receive Christ in different ways, other than the Eucharist, which in a sense is true, but it's not a substitute, which is sometimes they'd have you believe. And that, I mean, I can't say this for sure, but it seems to me, that it is a concerted effort to miscatechize or badly catechize people for fear of them knowing too much, for fear of them taking down that old family album and looking through it and discovering their history and where they've come from, and their tradition and their forefathers. I get a feeling that it's on purpose. The books that have been written, for schools and for children and for sacramental preparation are horrific. Some of them, absolutely horrific. I mean, you get more faith from a recipe book than you would from some of these modern tools for preparation for sacrament. So, I don't know. This is a personal thought that I'm sharing with you. But I would not be surprised if it was a concerted effort to dumb down the catechesis on purpose in the modern church.
Absolutely.
I just
And
leave that with you.
infantilization is all what the modern, contemporary culture is all about. I mean, for years they've been making children's tests and exams easier and easier and easier, and trying to tell us that they're not, and that they're harder. But it's very simple. The exercise has been done. You give an O-level maths paper to GCSE A-star students, and they can't do it. They can't complete it. They don't know how to. And I've seen with my own eyes and heard with my own ears the infantilization of doctrine in mainstream Protestant denominations and in the contemporary Catholic Church. The standard of preaching, the standard of homilies, the standard of sermons, they're all Sunday school talks. There's this condescension all the time, talking down to people. And every time, for example, when the Novus Ordo Missae was corrected to a more proper literal translation of the Latin, the complaints then about, nobody knows what consubstantiation means.
Look it up.
Consubstantial means. Well, then look it up. And this idea that people have, what the irony that we live in an age where so much knowledge and information is at our fingertips. If you have one of these, you can access incredible libraries and archives of knowledge, etc. And yet people are the thickest and dumbest and most stupid they've ever been.
Including Vatican.
Well, I mean, it's clear to me that there was a consistent policy or polity post Vatican II of simply saying to people, "Oh, we don't bother, we don't do that anymore. Oh, we've done away with that. Oh, that's old stuff. We don't do that anymore." Blah blah blah. No explanations were ever given as to why what was done before is now no longer relevant or pertinent or anything else. Everyone was simply told, "Oh, that's old hat. Oh, that's old fashioned. Oh, we don't do that anymore." And somebody has said in the comments, 50% of Catholics don't know their faith, and probably it's not their fault, and that's true, sadly. But it's the same if you were to compare the traditional seminary formation with that's given in contemporary Novus Ordo seminaries. And I've said this before about the standard of theological education in other mainstream denominations. You have these unbelieving professors who think themselves clever because they deny this, that, and everything else. they now hold the academic post and are responsible for the teaching. And the trouble is you get people, God bless them, who feel a vocation to ministry. Now, here I'm not talking necessarily about Catholic priesthood, but across the Christian denomination, people who feel that they're called to service, that they feel called by God to something. Well, there's barely any discernment, and what discernment there is pap, and basically based on emotions, based on feelings. So it's all, why do you feel that? How do you feel that God is calling you? What do you feel you are called to, etc. Then they, and at this stage, they have a sort of Sunday school, perhaps confirmation class level type appreciation of the faith. From that, they're then taken into seminaries, taken into theological colleges, and if they happen to have a degree prior, then often their time is shortened at theological college, and then they're left, as it were, to these walls of so-called contemporary theologians who disbelieve everything, who teach them critical theory on this, that, and everything else, and so on and so forth. And these people have nothing to go on, so that by the time they leave, they don't know any more theology than when they started, and all they are trained for, in some poor way, they think, is as social workers, because all the emphasis now is on service, and not on theology. And that's why they come out ill-equipped. They're ordained and then sent into parishes. They know no more really than the people they're supposedly called to serve. And they think that their role is to be, counsellor, is to be social activist, is to be social worker, etc. No concept of mediating sacred ministry, next to no prayer life. We know that in Novus Ordo seminaries, people don't want to be accused of being a holy Joe or an Anna in the temple. So they eschew the breviary, they eschew the liturgy of the hours. They're barely taught anything liturgy and rubrics, except the false interpretation that liturgia means work of the people, and that therefore active participation by the laity and by the community is what liturgy is all about. Whereas it isn't. Liturgia, yes, means work of the people, but it means work done by and on behalf of others for the people. Liturgia was in Greek ancient society public service. The public servants, the administrators of the government, they performed the liturgia, the work of the people, meaning they were working on behalf of the people. And so when it comes to the liturgy, the sacred ministers are there on behalf of the people. That's the true nature of liturgy. It's not about yes, everyone participates spiritually, of course. That's the ideal, and that's what should happen. But it's not necessary that everybody has a speaking part. It's not necessary that everybody has to do some action, and it's certainly not the idea that this is something that people have to contribute to. Remember what the Mass is. The Mass is the sacrifice of Christ upon the cross at Calvary. No one else can do that. No one else can do that. As the old hymn says, there was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. Only Jesus can die on the cross and save the world from its sin.
But I think their argument is that it can be expressed. It doesn't have to be expressed in the old way. There's a new way to evangelize. The world is looking for a new way. And so does the Bishop of Rome have the power to change the expression of the liturgy of as it has been for arguably a millennia? Can he do that? That's the question. Right. And I think that's what, because for me, and if you pardon me just saying so, is that I think that, catechesis, of course, yes, there must be catechesis, but, for me, we're in a state of war. There's a war going on out there. And as clerics, we're the front lines, and we're all going to be killed. And we're called to catechize, of course, to save souls, to curare animarum. That's what we're, okay. But we're all in different places. We're all doing different things, and we got to figure out, okay, how do we do that? And of course, that they, like you both have been saying, the answer is the same, because we have the liturgy, we have the proper catechesis. Now, take that. But when you have people, as you've both been saying, that don't even, you'd have to start from not even the beginning. You'd have to, as Joe Biden would say, we'd have to build back better. Not just build back better, we have to wreck what they've been taught in order for them to understand properly what they need to understand. And so on the battlefield, that's not for the battlefield. That's not a plan for the battlefield. You'll lose. St. Robert Bellarmine knew that. That's why they had to come up with something. What can I take in my pocket? And so we're in a different time. You couldn't be arguing maybe the same arguments are going on, but
Right, hold on a minute. What did Bellarmine do? He started the seminary system that we now have. He knew and recognized that the clergy needed what? Catechesis. They needed to be properly educated and formed, because it would be them that would then go and teach the others, who would go and teach the rest. What did he do?
I mean, that's okay. If that's the answer, because that's a 500-year. That's a 500-year answer. That's going to take 500 years.
He reformed the clerical life.
Sure, that's okay.
Personal holiness.
Yeah, but that's, again, I get it, and I think that's a good answer. It's just 500 years.
And likewise, that affected the laity. That affected everybody else.
Yeah, and, I agree. Excellency, I agree. In the meantime, I'm not going to see 500. Okay, so for me, and everybody else who's not going to see 500 or 250,
didn't take 500 years.
It's not going to take 50. It's not going to take 100. It's not going to take 150. It's going to take a long time for those reforms to take place. We don't even have cardinals or bishops who can be elected who might even sign on to those types of reforms right now.
But we have upwards of 700 priests in the SSPX. We have,
that's assuming they have all received
around the world, and clergy.
That's a huge assumption.
We have to start where we are. We have to start where we are.
But that doesn't. That's my point. Yes, we have to start where we are, but I still think that while it's the right answer, it's going to take 500 years if everything goes right. So in the meantime, where we are, in the midst of what we are, there has to be more that we can do.
We can only do what we are able to do, and with God's grace.
Okay, that's true, but that doesn't tell me much. All that tells me, what I want to know is that, okay, are there things of which I don't know about that I could be doing? Or are you saying to me, no, I think you know everything that you could be doing, and I think you're probably doing everything you could be doing. And I would suspect that every person that would approach you or me or Bishop Kelly, that's what they would want to know. Is there anything more that I could do in my state of life? And so I can say, you have children. Okay, well, I know you want to do this, but I would stay away from this. Or okay, you think you want to be a priest, like you were talking about earlier. yes, the number one way to determine whether, I think, a young man or a man of any man is called to the priesthood, let him live the life. Let him live the life of prayer that we have to live. If he can do that for a few years, then let's start talking about some education and maybe a life of a priest, which is the way it used to be done.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
And the only way to do it. What's wrong with that way? I mean, yeah, you're right. In terms of the contemporary situation, it may take centuries. It may do. But
Nothing's wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. Except that, as you both know, my perspective is different. I believe that God has called me in my mission around this perspective, and that I do believe that we are seeing some point of the end of what we'd always desired. It's not a bad thing that the coming of our Lord, the second coming, that it's coming closer now. But in the meantime, I know that I can tell people, you know what I do know? I'm going to die, and you're going to die, and you're going to die, and that there are 4 last things that we can all focus on that can help us, that can have a happy, holy death, and that can do it. That even doing that was what you both been saying. By doing that, you can even understand and learn and appreciate your mission here on earth now, even during these most trying times, even if all these things are taken away, even if the church says that you are outside the norm, that you have been, they call you the restorationist, and they're going to say that you're maybe even a schismatic, whatever, that you too can be holy by what? By learning proper catechism and by understanding and celebrating the proper sacraments. And so for me, that's meaty for me. I can say, oh, okay, yes. Okay, now I can take some of that. That's a lot. Yes, I know that's a lot. But I think you would say, okay, now. And I would say, okay, but I need help. Who is going to teach me? Because those teachings are just not up in the air. We just don't just go grab them. Oh, I want to learn the proper way of understanding catechism. Okay, it's infused. There's a lot of people who think that. No. Okay, then where do you find a holy somebody to help? And I tell people, hey, there's this nice bishop I know about in Chicago. He's kind of busy, but you can give him a call. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. If I hear of somebody on the other side, I say, oh yeah, I know someone over there. And then I know other people over there in Europe, in old Europe. There are people, but it takes work. It's going to be work. There's a mountain. And I think that there's an opportunity for us right now, I think, as a missionary cleric, that these beautiful things that were written in a different time, and I think of St. John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila or St. Robert Bellarmine or all the wonderful saints who were during other times of great destabilization of the church. And they talked about the mountain, about climbing the mountain. And when you climb that mountain, as beautiful as it can be, St. John the Cross will explain, climbing is not for resting. There's no resting. And when you're climbing, you're going to bleed. And there are going to be times when you get hurt. But stop crying. Get up. Be a man. That's still in the Psalms we read every day, that we read every day. Manfully get up. But then in the new church, they get rid of things like that. Oh, there's too much masculinity. The one recently here, I think it was in Chicago, Excellency, correct me or not, where they had 2 men give this homily. He may have brought this up earlier. And I thought right away.
Last Sunday on Father's
masculinity. Okay, is that promoting masculinity? They will say yes. They'll say that's promoting family. That's promoting children. That's promoting. Wait a minute. Who stood up and said, no. Instead, you had a Catholic church with the supposed Catholic priest and Catholic people clapping like this, politely clapping, even the ones who probably disagree. And I'll go even further. You probably saw this. A wonderful professor you and I both know, whom I love over here, and it published something who he had to apologize for what he said. He had to eat his hat. Because when this new motu proprio came down, he said that it would never happen. He's one of these restorationists who sits on the line and says we're too far over the line, but he understands where we are, but he believes he's right on the line, on the right side. Well, now, I don't know. And he's had to apologize publicly because he never thought that this would happen. And so when I look at, and I admire this guy, I call him a scholar. Few people I recognize as true scholars. He's one of them. And he recognizes he was reading it wrong. We all can get wrong. But my point is that those are the signs that we look for when we're looking for the signs of the times. That's a sign. And that's what I hope that neither of you know this. I don't mean this, but my new podcast, which I hope that will be starting soon, my new podcast will be focusing on these types of things to help explain, not just in a sort of a fluffy ways of just kind of throwing it out there. There are ways to understand this, and there are ways to take it and to use it to help you become a better catechized and well-formed Roman Catholic, so that when you are able to attend the proper sacraments, the Holy Mass properly celebrated, when you are able to do that you are able to receive as much as your God intends for you. And then in your life, that your mission in life, because Excellency said this in the beginning, I hope everybody caught it. Not everyone's called to do what a priest is called to do. Not everyone's called to do what a missionary is called to do. Not everyone's called to do what a teacher is called to do. So there are many who want to do those types of things, but you're not called to do that. So when you try to do it, it's perverted. It comes out wrong. It may be the right thing, but my point is that when you're understanding catechesis properly, you begin to understand. Excellency talk about proper discernment. That's when you begin to understand proper discernment, and then guess what? You begin to understand properly the Holy Mass. And believe me, when you do that, everything else, it's like, like St. Paul said, scales start to fall. They do. They scales, the blurriness kind of goes away. Things are not as clear as we might all think. And I'm not saying that I see as clearly as I know I should. However, as I look to His Excellency Archbishop and to Bishop Kelly, God puts us on earth for a reason, and he gives us our mission for a reason. And we're doing this for a reason. We're not doing this for each other, I guarantee you that, to amuse each other. We each believe that we have a mission and there's a reason, and we constantly try to seek and find until our last breath what that is that God desires through our vocation to what? To bring it to you. And times are so difficult right now. Who would have thought 2 years ago that we'd be doing it this way? Through this crude form, but yet it's how the whole world has moved. The whole world has moved to this way of communicating. As someone else put it, the elephant in the Zoom. That's a reference that we now can understand. A new reference, the elephant in the Zoom. So that's kind of that's what I look. That's why I tune into the show. That's why I watch the show. That's why I tune into any of this type of stuff. I hope it's not for amusement. It's because I want to learn, and I hope that those who are tuning in, might learn and might find that they too are progressing in their spiritual life.
Yeah, and I think again, one of the things is to have the correct attitude and understanding. For example, I was discussing this earlier today with someone. Faith is a system of understanding, not a perception. Um, you know, I say this in response really to those who think that faith and spirituality and religion is something ethereal and aesthetical and supernatural and spiritual. The whole point of the Christian faith is that it's incarnational, and the development of our theology has all been about understanding reality. You know, the Catholic faith is about understanding reality. It's about knowing, it's about being able to look at the world as it is and understand why it is the way it is and how it ought to be, and how we ought to interact with it appropriately and correctly as God has revealed to us the way to do. Um, and, you know, when we have a proper grasp and understanding of Catholic doctrine and theology and philosophy, we can better deal with the day-to-day things that go on in our lives. We can better deal with tragedy. We can better deal with death. We can better deal with disappointments. We can better deal with the craziness of the world. It's the faith, our religion, is about how to deal with and how to understand the realities of our situation. And again, until people have that appreciation and understanding of the faith, they will always be subject to their emotions and their passions. And as I said to someone today, it's not, you know, the Catholic faith is not about stoicism. So it's not about divorcing ourselves from our passions and our emotions. It's about balance. It's about finding and striking that harmony necessary, which requires self-control, which requires self-discipline, which it recognizes and accepts the necessity to appeal to a higher authority and to employ a higher sense of morality, etc. It's, you know, this is the difference in terms of not just worldview, but in terms of living life that should be for the Catholic as opposed to anybody else in our contemporary world. But all the time that people think religion and faith and spirituality is something just ethereal, just something spiritual, they're missing the point. And they're forever going to be disappointed and find the faith disappointing and be easily swayed and led other ways. Catholic faith, Catholic religion is about understanding reality and dealing with reality. And that's why, for example, you know, if we take the abortion debate, you know, the Catholic perspective deals with the reality of human fertilization and conception and the beginning of human life, which just happens to chime with biology and science. Likewise, the Catholic perspective, the true Catholic perspective on sex and sexuality and sex and gender, again, is logical and makes sense, is demonstrably provable, as opposed to the pseudoscience, cryptoscience, and craziness of transgenderism, etc. It's, you know, Catholicism deals with reality, and I think that's a fundamental that somebody approaching the faith, or coming to faith, or wanting to know about the faith needs to understand. That it's not, Catholicism is not a philosophy. Of course, there are elements of philosophy in it, and you know, we are proponents of philosophy. We have been through the ages, but the Catholic faith is a system of understanding reality and coping and living with it. Bishop Kelly, you've been very quiet.
No, I'm just listening to everything that's been said. There's not much to add to most of that. Yeah, I think you're right that Catholicism is a way of life. We've talked many times about,
but not just a way of life, but a way of understanding.
No, yes, yeah. It is the way of life, I should say, not just a way of life. I mean, it's all encompassing. It's a lens in which we view the world around us. It's a lens in which we interpret information. It's a lens through which we worship Almighty God for family relationships, for relationships in general, how we interface with the world, how we live our lives in the cycle of nature and everything else. It is a total, most people think Catholicism, or indeed Christianity, is something like a hat you put on Sunday to go to church. I think the Buddhists are much better at this than we are, because it is generally all-encompassing in the way they live their lives. And it was for us at one stage. Certainly the medieval life, the medieval Christian life, was all-encompassing. God was everywhere. God was everything. Any interaction you ever had, be it with nature, commerce, family, friends, enemies, was all done with the notion of God, with the notion of faith. And I think for those who embrace Catholicism, and this is part of our evangelization, is that it is a way of life. It's not just a Sunday hat. It's something that you do every single moment of the day. Whether it's, you see something that sparks your conscience and you say a prayer, or you do something silly, or even a venial sin, and you say, God have mercy. You're aware that God surrounds all things and contains all things. And if you have surrendered your life to God, then you owe God that completely. Just as God marks the seasons, so do we. We have our Easter and our Christmas and our Rogation days, and we have our feast days, we have our fasting, we have our Fridays. All of these things are very important, and it's incumbent upon us to catechize our children. It's incumbent upon us to evangelize the world, not to sit quietly in the corner of the office when the faith is being actively attacked and not say anything. We need to do that. We need to be crusaders in that sense. I think one of the, and this is Archbishop Lefebvre's bigger than the liturgy. His fear was all paths lead to God. He said, well, what's the point of the missions? What's the point of well, it's completely against the word of Christ. No one comes to the Father except through me. End of. No other option to get there except through me. Now, that wasn't a papal encyclical. That wasn't a council that said that. That was our Lord Jesus Christ who taught that. And you best believe it. And if you care about people whom you love, then it's incumbent upon you to assure their salvation. That's your crusade in life. Is to go out there, to pray for them, to coax them. Not to ram it down their throats, but to show them what a beautiful life a Catholic life is. Make that sign of the cross when you're at a restaurant before you eat your meal. Don't be afraid to bring your religion into the marketplace, because there's so much filth there, as we've seen with the road protests. You know, and we've said many times in this show before, we've got to claim our spot in the marketplace. We've got to be visual, and visual about how we live our lives. That's the greatest way. It's the most impactful. Like, wearing a sandwich board placard saying the end of the world is nigh, handing out tracts, is nothing compared to people observing you living a Christian Catholic life. That will affect them much, much more than a tract or a sandwich board or a megaphone or any of these other things. Because that impresses people. People say, I want that life. And it's a life of joy, it's a life of hopeful expectation, because we know, as we said earlier, Christ alone died for our sins. And we are baptized into the body of Christ. And just as Christ died, we rise with Christ to eternal life. But we must remain within that body. So I don't care about the hijinks in St. Peter's the other day with Nancy Pelosi and Bergoglio and the rest of them and the photographers that were lined up and strategically placed. I don't care about agendas. I don't care about his little letter saying that all traditional Catholics are bad and they're not on the bus. You know, I'm quite happy being on the bus I'm on, because it's been a long journey since the words of Christ. So I really don't care about it. I care in the sense that it is leading people astray. I would put that caveat in there, but for me personally, you know, it's just insulting, and it's very sad to see that the shepherd of shepherds, Peter, insulting his own flock and deriding them. He's not correcting them. We're doing nothing wrong. We're just doing what we've always done. And if he condemns us, he condemns Christians for 1,600 years, or 1,960 years. So, no, let him have his tantrum. Let him be nasty. Believe you me, there'd be nastier popes than he. But yeah, I mean, just put your head down and enjoy living your Catholic life. And don't ever be afraid to profess it or share it.
And I think that's, you know, as we were saying before, you know, silence betokens consent. If you know, if you're involved, if you, you know, if read your kids in schools, etc. There's a documentary coming out soon, along the lines of What is a Woman, but this time from a British politician, about gender ideology in schools. And I've spoken before on this program of, you know, my efforts here to try and counter what's in our schools. But this documentary is going to expose exactly what is going on in our schools over here. And there are those who will think or assume, oh, well, you know, the Catholic schools will be okay. Do not make that mistake. You need, and actually, whether you have a child in a school or not, if you're a Catholic, you have every right to ask questions as to what is being taught in the Catholic schools. You have every right to ask and to question, and indeed to criticize. Certainly, the materials concerning relationships and sex education curricula that the Catholic Church in England and Wales's education department has have issued are better, certainly, than what is being offered. But at the end of the day, they're just, this RSEs just shouldn't be in the schools. Remember that the public consultation was wholly negative, and yet the government implemented this curriculum and has made it compulsory. And that's happened because people have been quiet about it. They've not countered it. But if you want to stop the maiming and psychological harming of the next generation of children, then you've got to do something about it, and we've all got to do something about it. We can't all just sit on the sidelines, say nothing, and let it happen, because that is what is happening. By saying nothing, they assume that it's okay and they're getting away with it, and that's got to be countered, and not just sex ed and gender ideology and everything, but all sorts of things going on, and as the results from the local diocese synodal way discussions have made clear, they've been completely hijacked by the left, and all the things that we said they would appear are there, and any traditionalist voices are being squashed. Basically, they're not going to make it to the final cut that goes to the synod. We knew that anyway. We told you that would be the case, but this is happening, and if you don't counter the bishops, if you don't counter the clergy. I mean, this is, Francis goes on about clericalism. He is a clericalist. The contemporary hierarchy are complete. They're all clericalists, and you have got to make your voices heard. You've got to make your voices heard. You've got to make demands for the traditional Latin Mass. You've got to demand that true, authentic Catholic doctrine is taught in the schools. You've got to demand that acts of public worship remain in our faith schools. It's just no good sitting on the sidelines and being quiet. That's why we're in the mess that we're in. It is literally why we are in the mess that we're in. I forget who it was who said, but bad things happen because good people stay silent. So if you want to save the world, if you want to be a true Catholic, and you want the true Catholic faith, then you've got to become active for it, primarily in your own personal life, in the pursuit of personal holiness, in the pursuit of personal spirituality, in the pursuit of true catechesis, in order to properly understand reality as it is, and play your part in saving the world. And as Bishop Kelly says, placards and tracts and all the rest of it, they're not going to cut it, because one of the greatest problems that we have facing the church is the accusation of hypocrisy. It's no good saying I'm a traditional Catholic, but I'm having an extramarital affair. I'm a traditional Catholic, but I don't, mind people getting divorced. I'm a traditional Catholic. I have no issue with people using contraception, etc., etc., etc. If you're going to be a traditional Catholic, be a traditional Catholic, and live a traditional Catholic life. And from that demand will come the sacraments. If you, wherever you are, however alone you may feel, if you begin to live a truly authentic traditional Catholic life that people can witness and see, they will be drawn to Jesus through you. They will be drawn to it. And when they come, you'll create a stable group, and then we can send priests, and then you can have the Mass. Or you simply demand the Mass where you are from the Catholic hierarchy, or you do your darndest to have it, or you support the other traditional Catholic priestly societies, etc. But you have to do it. There's no point waiting for us to come along and erect a steeple in your local neighborhood. Ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen that way. Unless you stump up the cash and the resources and everything else for that to happen. And if you do, we will be behind you. But we ain't got it. So, what's needed here for a true Catholic restoration, it's got to come from the faithful. And when you look at the history of the church, that's where it's always come from. When you think of all those churches in your neighborhood and everything else that are being closed down now, those great edifices to the Catholic faith that were once beautiful until they were attacked by the iconoclasts in the 60s and 70s, who were they built by? They were built by people who had a standard and of living much less than yours, who earned much less than you, but who gave, who sacrificed in order for those sanctuaries to be built, who gave and sacrificed of themselves to establish those parishes, that founded those monasteries and those convents, that created those schools, etc. It didn't come from nowhere. If you look, particularly if you look at the States, and particularly if you look here in the United Kingdom, where the medieval foundations had been taken away or didn't exist, all those great red brick Victorian Gothic edifices, those were erected by ordinary Catholics. And when they had built them, then the bishops came and consecrated them, and then the church took them over. But they were erected, those parishes, those churches were built because of the faithful. So at the end of the day, it does come down to the faithful. You have to live the faith, you have to want the faith, you have to demand the faith, and then the clergy will supply what you need to live the faith and to grow in the faith. But if you and I'm serious, if you want an Old Roman Mass Centre, you have to start it, and we will try and service it. But you have to start it, and we are getting to the stage now. Before we have more or less sort of suggested, well, you must try and get what you can from the contemporary hierarchy. I think the time is fast coming when that is no longer a viable option. And now you really do have to turn to us and to other traditional Catholic apostolates to get the true Mass and to get the sacraments and to get true Catholic teaching, faith and praxis. Because the situation in the contemporary church is not going to improve for a considerable time. After Francis will be Francis Mark II. Guaranteed. And he will embed what Francis has started now. And before you know it, the Roman Catholic Church will look like an Anglican Protestant denomination. That's the way it's going. That is the way it's going. If you support the Novus Ordo Missae, that's the end game. That's where it's going. That's the truth of the matter. And we see it. We see it in this synodal way. We see it in what's happening with Germany. We see it in what's happening with Pelosi in the Vatican this week. We see it in the attitude of Supich and Gregory and all the others. And, meanwhile, heroes of the faith like Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Zen, Cardinal Pell, Athanasius Schneider, all them, they're all being silenced. They're all being silenced. And I tell you now, Athanasius Schneider will never become a diocesan bishop. He will forever remain an auxiliary in Kazakhstan. He's already been told that he should be going around the world, giving conferences and talks and all the rest of it, and celebrating the traditional liturgy. And they will clamp down more on him. And Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Muller, and whoever it was who ordained Dom Alcuin Reid, they will all be clipped one way or another. I mean, Cardinal Zen, God love him, is in jail and nothing from the Vatican. No word of protestation, even that a prince of the church has been arrested under false charges and allegations. This is the situation. You know, we're not living a dream anymore. This is now a cruel reality. And again, those with the Catholic faith can see it, can see the reality. That was the beauty of visionaries like Marcel Lefebvre. He had the Catholic faith. He could see the way it was going. Everything he prophesied, everything has come true. And he was fundamentally right that it is about the faith. And for as much as we know and we love traditional-minded priests, you know, in the Novus Ordo, you know, some of them are great, etc. But unless they make a stand, they're going to be questioned, they're going to be silenced. It is becoming impossible to maintain the faith within the current structures. And actually, that has been true for a long time. For a long time. Part of the reason why we are still here. Part of the reason why Old Romans are still here is because this rot, this smoke of Satan, as Paul VI ironically put it, has been present in the church a long time. You know, in the comments here on YouTube, you know, people have made reference to Pius XII. For sure, Pius XII was not the absolute Catholic Pope that so many think he was. But for more than that, Pius X was not as you know, staunch or as sound as people think. The whole liturgical movement, the whole tinkering of the liturgy began with Pius X mucking about with the breviary. And you cannot underestimate, I know I've said this before, but you cannot underestimate what impact, you know, everything that has happened since, you could practically trace to that alteration of the breviary, that capitulation of saying to clergy, oh yes, it's okay, no, you mustn't, you know, I understand that you mustn't, it's too difficult and too hard, we can't expect that level of sacrifice from you, so we'll make it easier. And from then on, that's been the attitude all the way through. Less and less sacrifice. But the faith is all about sacrifice. Because that is the nature of God's love. That is the nature of love on the cross. That is the nature of the love of the Mass. That is the nature of the love of communion with God. Take away that sacrifice, well, just as they say, no pain, no gain. Well, unless anyone has anything else to add or they want to bring up.
Are you kidding? I know we're way over, so I don't dare start something else.
I've got to go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's bring things to a close. Now, how are we for next week?
I should be available. Yeah, I think from what
Brother.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes, I think I'm good for the next 4 or 5 weeks. So, excellent. So, if you enjoyed this this episode, this program, if you think that what we said should resonate with others, then please spread the word, share this episode and all other episodes that you've found interesting. Share them, encourage others to watch them, spread the word. Likewise, if you do appreciate these things, this production does come, although at minimal cost, it still comes at a cost. And if you do appreciate it, we do appreciate your donations, details for which are below your viewing screen. Particularly, we ask if you would become patrons via the Patreon channel. And I promise there will be, Brother Stanislaus has already referred to his podcast. I'm going to be, the domestic church will be starting again next week. And likewise, I'm tempted to give a daily podcast on the Patreon channel, exclusive to the Patreon channel, but a daily podcast there. So please be generous. If you do appreciate our efforts, then do subscribe. And remember what we've said. It's time to act. You can't be silent and not act anymore. It's not enough to sit on the sidelines and moan. The time is for action. We are now fighting to preserve the faith. We literally are fighting to preserve the faith for future generations. Believe it or not, the Pope has declared himself against the Catholic faith. That's essentially what he has done and what he has been doing. And the hierarchy are with him. And I don't care, as Bishop Kelly said, I don't care. If that makes me a schismatic, as Marcel Lefebvre said, so be it. A schismatic from what? Excommunicated from what? Not the true church. We're fighting for the soul of the church. We're fighting for the soul. We're fighting for the preservation of the Catholic faith and the salvation of souls. It is that serious. It really is that serious now. Bishop Kelly, would you be kind enough to impart a blessing?
The Lord be with you.
And with thy spirit.
And through the intercession of St. Peter and St. Paul, may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost be amongst you and remain with you forever. Amen.
Amen. Okie dokie. So we will be here next week, Deo Valente, and look out in the week for domestic church, and generally for more content that we will be adding over time. Meanwhile, God bless you all. Thank you for watching, and it's goodbye from me. And it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye from them. Gotta give him